Yeah, hello everyone. Today in this presentation, we were trying to discuss in detail what the strategic pricing for any product in the organization is. In the hospitality industry, it is very important to assess the profitability of any product, to assess the profits of any product, and to understand how, in continuous changing or dynamic environment conditions, strategically it is important to maintain the conditions so that the offering is always profitable and the pricing outcomes are always in coordination with the competition. So, that is what exactly strategic pricing policy looks like. So, in nutshell, we are going to understand the value creation created in any organization. So, what a value creation is? Value creation is when you are trying to assess what your product looks like, what all offerings your product has, for which segment, which market type, for the people who are going to consume your product, it will look like. What would be the price structure of your very product? Would it be flexible in nature? What would be the market forces which will be controlling the dynamics or the matrix which would be controlling the fluctuation of pricing policy of that very product? So sometimes the strategic pricing is a very value creation, but at the same time, awareness of your competition or the competitive awareness of the pricing of that very product in the competition is very important. There are a number of definitions and slight differences in opinion which are generally being used strategically for the pricing policies incorporated by any organization. But at the end of the day, it all depends upon the analysis, it all depends upon the pricing strategies, the pricing processes, which should complement your business strategy. Any decision which is taken in isolation never gives you an edge over any of the competition because everything has to go in coordination with your previous action. Like in last presentation we spoke about the price warfare technique, how companies often step into price warfare and how they identify price warfare as the most easiest thing to step into. But until and unless you don't have a right plan of action, until and unless you don't have a corporate strategy laid out in front of you, you don't have a long term perspective towards the changes or the value creation you are going to create, which is based on maybe the psychology or any logic or any study or any buying or purchasing decision analysis, you cannot talk about differentiating or determining your pricing policy, or you cannot assess or analyze any process which can help you create or capture the right price, which is to be understood as the customer value price or a shareholder value price. So customer value price would be the price of the product on which customers should settle to. Like for example, let's take the example of fruity. Fruity is a very popular drink in Indian market, but fruity was placed in the market keeping in mind the psychology of a customer, the logic behind that. It is very accessible, it is very pocket friendly. At the same time, it can be worked in volume, or it can be catered to mass market audiences so that company can generate enormous profit out of it. Then you need to assess the value communication. Value communication talks about your corporate communication within the organization as well as outer organization, wherein you would be talking to your channel partners, your advertising campaigns, your communication about the product and your value selling tools are being part of your value communication. Then come pricing policies. Pricing policies are basically when we talk about the tactics the company is going to use. It talks about the distribution network or distribution channel or the place of promotion or the place of sale being identified by the corporate for particular product, and then assessing that whether there would be any opportunity for negotiation in there, where there would be any opportunity or selling tactic which has been involved by the corporate or involved by the company or been incorporated by the company, so that the customer is being able to assess that this is the right product I'm getting for the right price. And then the price level. Price levels talks about the price setting, wherein after identifying all the analysis, understanding the psychology, understanding the pricing policies, analytics, processes, and being able to understand that your product is customers pocket friendly, your customer is being able to find the right productivity or right association with that very price. That is the point you determine this is the price for my product. After determining the right price of the product, then comes the strategic pricing, and we need to assess why it is so important. Why it is so important to have the right price for your product. Whenever we are doing marketing or whenever we are creating any kind of communication about our product to the customer, we need to assess various functions in it which can add value or which can bring value for the customer. Until and unless that communication is missing, customer will not be able to identify or then will able to satisfy by using that very product. And it will be very, very difficult for any company to retain the product, retain the customer with the same product. So there has to be a lot of emphasis on the communication tool. So the right communication is what the right strategy would be at the time of identifying the right pricing for the product. Then comes how it is important to assess about your customer, what your customer looks like, or how can you predict your customer choices, and how can you be ascertain that this is the product your customer is going to buy. How can you advocate your particular campaign which can influence the buying behavior or perception of any particular customer. So let's before understanding predicting the customer choice, we need to understand what is the customer and what is the exchange process in the marketing or in the communication. So when we're talking about the art of exchange, of course, like whenever we are in business, business is nothing just but an art of exchange. So if it is an art of exchange, we need to assess that it is the act of obtaining a desired object from someone by offering something of value in return. That is called the exchange process. So it involves the customer or maybe a buyer, or he or she can be an entity or can be just a person who is just willing to give money or maybe some other personal resource to address to this particular need. Then the second important factor, what it will have would be the product. A product would be a physical good, or maybe an experience, or maybe a service, or maybe an idea, or maybe a consultancy which is designed to fill the customer's want or need. Then comes the provider, maybe the seller. So the seller would be the company or the organization who is offering a need satisfying thing, or this can be a product, service, experience, or idea. And then there would be a transaction. So transaction is the term around which both parties agree to trade value for value. So most often it is money for product we are talking about. But at times, kind is also involved in business. But then here, when we are trying to assess business, we are trying to assess the strategic role of marketing in business, or we are trying to assess why the pricing policy or strategic pricing is very important in any business. We need to understand we are talking about creating a bundle of goods and services. We are trying to maximize the reward and minimize the cost in transactions. So in order to gain the most profitable outcomes, we are trying to achieve everybody's satisfaction level. And at the end of the day, we are trying to evaluate all the dimensions which could be tangible, intangible, and the price separately, of course. So when we are talking about pricing policy of any particular company or identifying the right pricing, or right communication about your product, eventually, whether it's price or whether it's your marketing campaign or whether it's any type of communication about your offering, we assess that it is the business scenario or it is the transaction we are talking about, where the marketing or the communication is going to identify the customer, their needs, and how much value they can place on getting those needs addressed to. Then we need to assess the basic design, or maybe we need to assess how the design of the product will look like in the form of communication to ensure that customer will be able to satisfy his needs, and we need to provide the value proportional to what it cost. We need to assess that our communication is responsible for communicating with customers about products, explaining who is offering them and why they are desirable, like which particular need our product is going to fulfill. We need to assess the communication is also responsible for listening to customers and communicating back to the providers about how well they are satisfying customer needs and opportunities for improvement. It also helps shaping up the locations and term of the transaction as well as experience, so that customer have all the feel for the product, and customer is able to have the right experience with the product after the product is being delivered. So communication is what it creates. Communication creates value for customer. So when we are talking about strategic pricing, before getting into even or identifying the strategic pricing, we need to identify the right communication channel. And until and unless we are being able to identify, or we are being able to communicate, or we are being able to market the right communication about our product, we will not be able to create the value for our customer. And if the value for customer is missing about our product, we will never be able to get that product placed in the mind of the customer. So the role of communication is to identify, satisfy, and retain the customer. So technically, we are just trying to assess the business which should have higher visibility, communication which is being able to represent our company, product, its services, and we are able to minimize the expenditure by organizing the strategies, controlling the budget, controlling the operations, and above all, we need to understand at the end of the day, it's the goodwill, it's the reputation. Whenever we are offering our any product or any communication or any services in the competition, we are staking out our whole reputation. So whenever reputation is at stake, we need to understand the kind of product we are catering to, or we are going to offer to. It has been able to identify it has been able to utilize well, it has been able to consume well, it has been able to cater to the social, individual, at times medical, at times psychological, or any particular need, whatever we have promised for. Though there's no model which guarantees the communication success, but whenever we are talking about effective communication, that may become very, very expensive, because of course marketing or communication or strategic marketing is very, very expensive, because it has to identify, satisfy, and retain the customer, which is a very, very complex structure. And the communication program is worth the cost of only if it is able to facilitate the organization's ability to reach its goal. And the major role, or any prima facie role any organization would be having, would be nothing just but to cater to the need of the customer. Okay, now I think you will be able to understand more when we are talking about the choice modeling, or I'll talk about the how any company after communication, or even before uh, taking the product to the customer, we need to assess what our communication would look like, so that we can offer what customers' choice is. So here we are assessing, or we are predicting what the customer's choice is. So when we are talking about customer's choice, or we are talking about creating a preferred structure or preference structure, or such modeling techniques which can help us model the particular product as per the customer interest, so that the purchase choices can be meant, or marketing solution or strategy would be to affect the sales of a particular product for the company. So there are certain tools which any company wish to. So it talks about configure a new product or services, reconfigure, evaluate, reevaluate, better understanding what drives customer preferences, introduce a line extension, or set prices for maximum profitability. So when we're talking about configuring a new product or services, it is basically identifying the need analysis in the market, or identifying the gap in the market, that what is not available which can help you creating a USP, or help you creating a first mover advantage, because that is a very, very effective tool in the organization. Then comes reconfigure an existing product. This talks about re-identifying what market needs. At times, having a first mover advantage doesn't really mean that market is ready for it. So, as you understood the market, you have launched your product. Now, market is when market is consuming you, there would be the speed which would be lacking. So that is where you need to identify, or you need to understand what customer what you need to do something extra to satisfy, to retain your customer, right? So there would be a possibility to reconfigure your product, or redesign your product, or restructure your product. Then comes evaluation, whether a new concept is viable before it is known. So this is about rechecking, this is about reassessing whether the first mover advantage was right or wrong, or whether the USP you're banking on are the best to know. And then understanding what is better, that what drives the customer preferences, what customer want. Then introducing a line extension. Line extension talks about how you can maximize the profitability of the whole line. So let's say we are talking about, we have a particular kind of service which is dealing to a particular kind of need, and there are certain sub needs which are attached to it. Like for example, when we are talking about McDonald's pizza or McDonald's burger, so you will always find French fries and cold drink, the sides being part of it. So is it necessary that every time you want to have a burger, there has to be a French fries and there has to be a cold drink along with it? The need has been created like that, wherein the customer wants it. That is where company is being able to maximize the profitability of the whole line by introducing a line extension with a minimal cost, or by setting prices for maximum profitability. This comes when you have a niche product. This is when you have the niche audiences, when you have the niche offering to offer to, and which is very, very unique in nature. You don't really have any competition in the market for. And you have been able to package your product well. So that is where you can play with the maximum profitability. So again, when we are talking about identifying the how we can leverage on our product, and how we can bring in new techniques, or differ them from any analysis, or we can review the competition, we can bring in the competitive offers, and we can redesign the approach, looking at the choice of the customer. That is where you can actually create a difference, or where actually you can identify the right pattern for their choices. That is where the right price modeling will happen, when you understand your customer, when you are able to respond to the marketplace, and when you're able to examine the market share impact of product configuration. Then you can understand how the service bundling of your product is, how the pricing policy of your company is, what is the promotion line your company is working on. So again, when we're talking about a choice modeling, that is basically having a right eye on the analytical technique and predicting the preferences of the customer, so that there's the right data you're being able to identify, and you're being able to predict the customer preference. So again, coming back on this, it is something to design or predict the likelihood of a customer being able to select one product over alternative, or being able to select your product over alternatives. This has been able to measure the value for your customer about your product. That is the customer is the center of attraction. Customer is the key, customer is the king, and you have kept customer in the center of everything, so that all the decisions can be drawn keeping in mind the market situation, keeping in mind all the modifications, all the product modification, or all the revolving techniques, or the focus, or the motivation, or the detailing, or the structuring, hypothesis, uh, program extension or service extension, or anything. It is every time been made or bundled up, keeping customer in mind. Okay, let's understand more to it. What is a choice modeling? So when we're talking about choice modeling, that is where we are identifying what our customer want, what all steps it takes. So one, of course, it talks about the focus groups. Focus groups is a sample data. It is based on the demographic profile, the psychological profile, the grouping of a particular type of data to assess what customer wants, which needs to have the detailed study of it, wherein you have been able to listen to customers' impression of product. You have been able to assess the factors which are going to affect the demand and supply situation of that very product, or demand and choice situation of your very product. Second comes wherein you are trying to test the hypothesis from the focus group in the experimental state. That is where you are trying to involve surveys, you are trying to particularly make your existing product more useful to the sample data, wherein you are trying to create a survey for the potential customers and observe how they buy, their buying behavior. You need to experiment a lot with the choices. You need to assess the hypothetical marketplace wherein the customer is being pampered or being lured a lot to buy your product. So this helps you assessing what customer want, why customer will choose your product, why customer will not choose your product, at what time or how much time it takes to influence the buying decision or the repeat buying of that very product by the customer. So this is where you understand whether you're sitting on the right price or no. And once the data is collected, the final step you need to look at is you need to understand the key market segments for the product, and you need to understand how price sensitive it is, how much brand name is worth, or how much the product brand name is worth, how much the advertising or promotional activities gonna be effective, and how much will it be pocket friendly, and where should you target your efforts. So are you at the right place at the right time with the right product with the right price or no? Have you been able to identify the right market segmentation for your product? Have you been able to analyze the demand in most tactical buying behavior, most tactical marketing decision, or while identifying your strategic planning, have you been able to assess all the drivers which drive your buying decisions? Okay, here we are going to talk about how companies, after assessing that what customer wants, and how after estimating the market potential, market segmentation, after being able to analyze the real time demand, which may be from regional or from center, being able to configure the right product, the pricing, the positioning, and being able to assess the value of branding a new product. That is where the company decides to step into a new market. So when we are talking about stepping into a new market, does it just means that we are talking about expansion, or are we talking about the disciplined process which helps you accurately assess the potential of each growth opportunity? Okay, to take it more further, we need to understand what it is stepping into a new market. Whenever we are talking about stepping into a new market, we are talking about the effective way to leverage your core business for growth. We are talking about the disciplined process to accurately assess the potential of each market and opportunity. We are talking about investing the appropriate level of resources in the market analysis, selection, and entry methods so that we can create a foundation for success in the chosen market. Or here, maybe we are trying to define the market, or maybe we are trying to perform the market analysis or assess the internal capabilities. When we're talking about defining the market, that's a simple step that talks about identifying the place to sell your product. It is often very difficult when we are trying to understand the need of the people who are going to consume our product. So technically, you are trying to consider the demographics over here. You're trying to consider the location, the buying behavior, the preferences, the common interests that would be psychological or social, or you need to assess the need of a target customer. Like for example, you are healing from a you're healing from a place, or you're trying to set up your market expansion as a place which is a lot dependent upon the climatic conditions. Until and unless your product or services has been designed the way it can overcome the climatic hurdles, you will not be able to sustain in the market. Then comes performing the market analysis. Performing the market analysis talks about identifying the right market research for your target customer. You need to assess what you want to develop, maybe an in-depth study or in-depth understanding of market growth rates. You need to be able to forecast the demand. You need to be able to understand how much competition it will bring in, or the potential barriers it would have, maybe maybe through government, maybe through competition, maybe through external market forces. So it is particularly important if you're looking to enter into a relatively undefined market. You need to assess, or you need to perform the real time market analysis, which can help you create a right understanding about how much you are capable, how much you have been able to assess the growth rate or the potential or the right potential to step into that very market. Then how much you have been able to assess the internal capabilities, that talks about the capability assessment of the market forces, the assessment of your competencies, your core competencies, which you may be able to leverage on. You need to understand or assess about your team, your channel, your infra would be technical, non-technical, the people, the team, the relationships, your PR network, what time to market consideration exists, the agencies you are relying on, channel partners, your distribution networks. So, and technically to identify your whole marketplace you are sitting on. Then you need to prioritize and select the market, like which market is right for you for the expansion. Are you a right strategic fit? Will it leverage your existing business, or you will be able to land up creating a lot of gap between your existing business while trying to tap on a new business? Are you willing to stake out what you are paying for? So at the end of the day, whenever we are talking about expansion, we are talking about growth. So while jumping on growth, we always need to assess what we are losing on so that there is no gap, so that you've been able to develop on the right market entry options. When we are talking about developing the right market entry option, that is where we are talking about the right combinations or right acquisitions, right sales channels, right distribution channels for the organic growth of an organization. We are trying to assess how we are going to develop the business plan, from where the investment flow would be, how the implementation of work plan would look like, which needs to include the owners, the timelines, the tasks, or the milestones company need to achieve, so that this company always has a flow of growth which is intact. While entering into a new market, you need to assess the core assets which are going to get leveraged out of it. You need to assess the joint ventures, the partnerships you're going to step into, the market identification, the prioritization of your work expansion, the diligence, the negotiations, the approximities of how the market mix will be able to leverage your business core competency, your assets, and your overall growth strategy. That is where you need to assess the best decisions for your company, and you need to, of course, you need to identify the options around cost, risk, predictability. So, when we're talking about assessing the competition or assessing the market before getting into that, is where we are trying to identify the right place for our product so that you can have the right product, right control on your investment, or you are being able to mitigate the risks. So at the end of the day, whenever we are talking about any particular company's growth strategy, that is where we are trying to talk about how the expansion is going to leverage on the company's overall growth, how companies will be able to catch the notice by surprise, how will be a company will be able to catch a real time market excellence by catching the change by surprise. So, this all often helps. Shifting to a new marketplace always create a lot of opportunity for the company. Okay, here we are going to talk about something very interesting these days. We are talking about coronavirus. So, I thought coronavirus is something, the most talk of the town product. This can be taken as a very good example to assess how companies can leverage from any kind of situation. Okay, here we are going to talk about a company. It's a tent craft company which has a tent, like which is into manufacturing of tent. Earlier, this company was not doing so good, not very fabulous. So, as this pandemic, before pre-pandemic, the company wasn't doing very great. Like rather, the company was in a crisis situation because how to create the demand for this very product, which is very different in nature. So, as the pandemic struck, that is where the company had a solution for every kind of medical solution. So here company was quickly being able to identify the new marketplace, new customer base, being able to recapture it. So here I'm not talking about capturing or recapturing. Here I'm talking about how you can identify to create a right business opportunity for yourself so that every situation is a win-win situation for you. With this note, I would like to say thanks for today. I hope this very presentation was useful to you. You were able to understand why right pricing is very important for any kind of customer in for any kind of prod, product in the organization, why it is very important for any organization to understand what customer want and what should be the value of that very product, so that the customer is being able to associate the right value derived out of that very product or the price customer has paid for. So technically, in this whole uh, gimmick, we are trying to understand the right price for the right product for the right person who is going to use it at the right marketplace where the right promotion was being bundled up. With this note, thank you so much for today.